Please be advised we are recording. To the cloud.
Derek, what does your t-shirt say? I'm sure it's something interesting.
It's Albert Einstein. It's from Senge and Sue. Says the most beautiful thing is the mysterious.
Awesome.
Let me just correct the camera here. There we go. That's kind of like how I like these calls to go. That's called aspiration.
That's right.
I want to see cats walking back and forth, or at least their tails.
Yeah, it won't happen on this call.
Oh,
Sorry to say. It's a nice day outside, and Tut has gone out to try to disprove the fact that he lives in a Buddhist house and to add to the body count that he accumulated out there.
great.
So yeah, the mortality rate for local critters is pretty high while he's outside.
Cat as co-mortality, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
All right, so it's 5 after 10. If it's all right with everybody, I'm gonna just say a couple of housekeeping things and then introduce our esteemed guest. So first things first, for most of this, I'm gonna mute folks, but if you need to be unmuted, you have the power, I think, and you know how. And if you want to submit a question, I'm going to act as a bit of moderator and grab questions from the chat. So if you have a question that's in your mind in the moment, you want to just like drop it in the chat, I will keep track of that. And when it's a good moment, I will read out your question or put you off of mute and let you say your question yourself. And we're recording, if that's all right with everybody. And any other questions or issues or anything that comes up, please feel free to put it in the chat or send me a text message, or if you need to unmute and say help or whatever. Okay, so I believe that most people here are already good friends and Sangha members and colleagues, but you know what? I learned quite a bit from Derek's bio, and I'd really like to read it to you.
I cut and pasted a lot of stuff from other people on Wikipedia. It's way better now.
So Derek helped to found the Alliance for Nonviolent Action in Canada and organized peace walks and blockades of weapons manufacturers in Canada in the 80s. Derek lived in Iqaluit for 12 years, working for the Inuit representative group Nunavut Tungavik, is that pronounced correctly? Incorporated. He attended UN Climate Change Conference COP11 in 2005 with NTI and was a legal researcher for NTI's treaty lawsuit against Canada. Derek attended the Kinmount Academy and Seminary, and he taught meditation and led retreats in Nunavut, Quebec, Ontario, British Columbia, Hungary, Spain, Finland, New Zealand, and the US. Derek is doing graduate studies on the 4 immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, and Anatta, non-self, and Shunyata, non-thingness, in order to support those working for social and ecological justice.
Thanks, Lisa.
And if I may take one more minute of the call, I just want to say how pleased we are to have Derek here and how happy I am personally to get to talk to Derek, because I remember as a kid, Derek was always the member of our Sangha who was at my school talking about the Arctic, or keeping that vital link between Dharma and activism alive, and the lens and the spotlight on that. And when 2020 happened, I personally felt that out of my Sangha and friend group that Derek was someone that I really wanted to have a conversation with about Rinpoche, what he taught, teacher training, the Abhidharma, activism, how it all applies now. And so I'm just so pleased to have this chance to hear, Derek, what you have to say.
Thanks, Lisa.
And take it away.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So let's start. Namo tassa
Tassa bhagavato
bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Compassion, awareness, wisdom. Maybe we'll start with some practice of the first immeasurable. So let's recollect our experience of friendliness and warmth. This I say because probably common with many of you, we've all had those moments in the temple at the Dharma Center where we ran up to Rinpoche and Terry at the door, stopping them because we didn't understand a meditation instruction. I can't be the only one that had that happen repeatedly, but I recall after Rinpoche taught the Brahmaviharas for the first time, I got the impression this was about infinite love for all beings, and that seemed an insurmountable goal for someone so firmly rooted in dosa. So I ran up to the door, stopping Rinpoche and saying, I don't think I can do this. And he turned around and said, well, can you do warm? Can you do warm and friendly? And I thought, oh, that sounds hopefully achievable, maybe eventually. He said, well, then just do warm and friendly. So that's how I approach the first immeasurable. So we'll imagine warmth and friendliness permeating the body. And you can move either direction from the ground and support of the planet up or from the head down. I'll start from the head down. Imagine warmth and friendliness permeating the. We'll start with the hard stuff, the bones, skull, teeth. A feeling of friendly warmth in the collarbone, in the shoulder blades, in the vertebrae, hopefully stacked smoothly like plates in the cupboard. Warm feeling in the vertebrae, the ribs, and the bones in the arms and hands, down to the hip bones, and a friendly warm feeling in the bones in the legs, and the knee, the feet. Well, let's start at the top again, and now warmth and friendliness in the tissues and muscles and the soft stuff, the brain, the eyes. Cheeks and jaw, the neck, a relaxed, open, kind feeling in the torso, the arms, hands. An accepting, warm feeling in the tummy. And warmth and friendliness in the legs and the feet. A warm and friendly feeling in the senses. An attentiveness and receptiveness in the eyes and the sense of vision, kindness. And a warmth and kindness in the sense of smell in the nose. And a friendly, receptive feeling in the mouth and the tongue and the sense of taste. A receptive, kind, open feeling in the hearing and the ears. And the skin, warmth and friendly feeling. The sense of touch, sensitivity to temperature and pressure all over the body is warm, open. Now imagine warmth and friendliness coming from the green plants, exhaling into the air that we inhale. Warmth and friendliness in the respiration. And 300 million alveoli sacs in the lungs, gently inflating, deflating with loving kindness, friendly, warm feeling. If we were to put all these together, they make a sail, like a sail of a ship that inflates and deflates. It would be 30 times the size of the human body. And this is contacted with each breath, warm and friendly. Now imagine this warm, friendly feeling radiates forward from our bodies. It can be rolling out into the environment, or like thousands of pores, like eyes have opened, and in the forward direction, friendly, accepting, kind feeling radiates forward, interpenetrating with the friendliness and warmth of the environment, so that the forward direction, however near or far, feels comfortable, is permeated with this kind, open feeling. This friendliness and warmth may bring rise to species and beings in the forward direction, plants and animals, people, pets. Imagine them all permeated with kindness and openness. Imagine them resonating with this feeling. Well, let's move clockwise now around the body and in the right-hand direction, and allow ourselves to feel warmth and openness, gently stretching out from the right side of the body, a gentle feeling like caress or an embrace of the phenomena toward the right. Continuing clockwise, this radiates out behind us. Gentle caress, embrace, feeling, or just that feeling of shared vibration of open warmth, permeating space and objects, furniture and walls, and beings. And now clockwise to the left, filling in that space, and recognizing friendly, warm feeling that resonates, permeating the space and the objects, the beings to the left. Now down, friendly, warm feeling permeating soil, roots, creatures, and the spaces and waters, mushrooms and bacteria and all the phenomena beneath us, warmed, feel radiant with kindness. And warmth radiating upwards, a heart caressing the sky. So mutual recognition of kindness, friendliness, and openness, and receptivity in the upward direction, permeating space and objects, beings. Oh, friendly, warm feeling across and up and down without any particular center, without any particular edge. Let's now briefly think of any beings we know who need healing and imagine them permeated with this friendliness and healing. Mhm. Let's, while we're at it, share the merit. Whatever merit is in this practice, may it be shared for the benefit of all beings. So I was having a chat with Lisa and Karen a while ago, and they asked about a retreat many of us were on September 11th. During that event, Rinpoche was teaching the Kala Chakra. And it happened, the Kala Chakra, as you all know, tends to kind of peak in the middle of the empowerments. You get a whole bunch of empowerments kind of in the middle of the, whether it's 5 days or 11 days. And that day happened to be the 11th. And we were closed in retreat. And Rinpoche came in and informed us in the afternoon that something had happened, and it was a terrible event, and that he would be giving teaching after the Kala Chakra ended. And he said he would be giving the Maitreya empowerment, which is the Tonka behind me here, of loving kindness, practice of the future Buddha. And he recommended people do lots of Brahmavihara practice, or the four immeasurables. Now, fortunately for us in this Sangha, most of you don't have this experience, but it's, for me, I usually feel like I can't do the things Rinpoche suggests that we do, and I usually feel like I'm going to fail miserably at just about everything he suggests. Luckily, on this day, he gave probably the most poignant and powerful advice I feel like I ever heard during a teaching. He then said, this is going to be a really difficult time. There will be lots of conflict, probably a lot of violence, and the world will need a lot of loving kindness. And then he said, the part that struck me the most was, he said, you know, it's not going to be enough what the lamas do. He said, what this being does won't be enough. He said, the rabbis and priests, the Rinpoches, the imams, we will all pray. We'll pray, but it won't be enough. I was kind of stunned. He said, because heaven is more moved by the prayers of one sinner than the prayers of 1,000 saints. He said, so it's really up to you. Someone has to do some practice. People have to get serious. And this time really demands, and then he said this phrase, which many of us have heard, that you pray mightily, pray mightily. I was struck by that, and he said, if there's any of you in the peace movement or who've been in the peace movement, this is a time to take your practice very seriously. And I looked around the room and thought, rats. I think he may mean me. So usually I felt like when he was saying these things, he was chucking out obligations, and I would try and duck and think they might miss me. So I kind of vowed that I would do a lot of practice. And then on the weekend that followed, he gave them Maitreya empowerment. This particular Maitreya has 3 faces, which is important. One looks into the good aspects of your being, one accepts and looks into the defilement aspect of your being, and the central face is golden and is the balance and integration of these. And it's a very powerful empowerment for me. And I decided then that I would do 1 million of this practice. And I quit my job that I had coming up that was supposed to start on the Monday after this, and thought cleverly that I would go into retreat. I wouldn't tell Rinpoche what I was doing. I would just stay in retreat because I was so superstitious. I thought if I tell anybody what I'm trying to do, I'll never finish. I'll self-sabotage. But I'll just stay there until I get this done. And luckily there were no pending bookings on Galaxy Cabin, and I was able to stay, and it took a lot longer than I thought. So I had to keep postponing my exit until I got to the point where I finished, right? And then when I was about 50,000 from the end, that's when I told him what I'd done. Because I figured, well, there was so much momentum, there was no way I wasn't going to finish now, and I wouldn't screw it up. And I have to say, for all that time, which was over a winter from September to the following April, you know, sometimes there's fireworks and bells and whistles in retreat. This one, there wasn't any in particular. I mean, not that I, you know, there wasn't any fancy stuff particularly that happened, but it was just a body of work and some important interviews with the teacher, of course, during that time. But that phrase that he said, you know, about how important it is for us to practice and not to think that this is up to the spiritually advanced and accomplished beings to do it. That really moved me. And yeah, that was the story I wanted to share from that event, because not everybody was there, but that was kind of the key turning point. And I did feel like when I came out of that retreat, and then I think it was that summer, it was because that would have been the following year, he did the Teaching for Teachers retreats. And many of the old guard, if you like, have talked about those retreats, you know, other retreats like in Crete or places where they did months of retreat with Rinpoche. And then he, in the year that he died, he did Teaching for Teachers retreats, 3 of them. And I felt, as we've talked about it, Karen and I, or with Lisa, we talked about the kind of skill set he gave or encouraged us to develop. And some of us were in the academy together. That was another Teaching for Teachers session. And in our academy, not the other academies that I'm aware of, but in our academy, we had a little bit of difficulty with group dynamics. We weren't always completely harmonious. And despite our efforts to hide these failings, Rinpoche noticed. And towards the end of our session, having 3 years of living together, and we were still at each other's throats a lot of the time, you know, being as we were full of loving kindness and, you know, dedicated Dharma practitioners heading out in the world to save beings, and we could barely tolerate each other. Rinpoche, perceiving this, decided in his wisdom that the way to help us mesh as a group and develop some kind of harmonious cooperative skill ability was to make us do a quilt. And that was our last project we did in the academy. A photograph of which Karen took a picture of it, and Lisa used it as the poster for this talk, because it kind of captures this, I think, the skill and wisdom Rinpoche had of putting us together and giving us a project which bound us together. it wasn't a meditation per se, you know. Of course, working together and quilting is a meditation, but it wasn't, you know, a sadhana or something like that. But it was really skillful. And then and allowing the skill of the group to come out and kind of lift us. He didn't depend, it wasn't him. Once we were there, Wendy Pierce and a couple of others taught us songs in rounds. And this is what I was talking to Senge on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and it's what he remembers, not the sewing, it's the singing, and how the singing bound us together and helped us sew better. And this, it wasn't Rinpoche teaching us singing, it was one of the Sangha members, one of the Academy members. So the skills of the group, he was trying to get us to allow the skills of the group to flourish and come out and support each other. And also, I think, develop the ability in us to actually open our eyes and see the skills that other group members have. And anyhow, to me, that was a lesson of the quilt and the Teaching for Teachers retreats, was the diversity of things we were encouraged to develop. We were encouraged to perform plays, interpret and explain Pali terms or physics. We were encouraged to dance and do yoga, do therapy. It was just art and sculpture. It was a wide diversity of skills. And in a way, we picked a title talking about this revolutionary moment because it's a dire and desperate time for the planet's ecosystems and people. But I feel like our teachers, and here I include the broader Sangha of teachers that we have, prepared us for this, have trained us to be of use and be helpful at this time. I just wanted to encourage people. So that's it, finished. I'm gonna sign off now. But that was it. It was just to encourage people. And Lisa has a list of I've sent it to her so she can actually put it on screen or share it with people. But of the few pages that Karen Meredith put together, I think along with the help of Trudy Gold, of the things that were taught during that retreat, during those retreats. There were 3 2-week retreats in the summer of 2003. And it's not, it's all stuff you've done before on these courses with Rinpoche and with Tarchin and Cecily and Mark and, all these teachers. So it's nothing new to the people on this call, for sure. But it was that was the purpose of taking some time to get together. This is September. It's the anniversary, if you like, or of that retreat many years ago with Rinpoche, when 9/11 happened, and when he encouraged us to practice and be of use to beings. So that's it. And there's some of it. And if for people who don't have this, we have obviously this is a Word document Lisa's put on screen, and we can share it with beings. And it's not particularly that there's anything on here that would surprise you. It's actually just the breadth and range and diversity of approaches. Because I recall being in a class where where Rinpoche said to the group, when I die, 12 or 14 different people will stand up and say, "Oh, I represent Rinpoche's true teaching." And he said, and they'll be wrong. And I thought about it. And of course, I didn't have the guts to say it in the class, but I remember what went through my mind was, yeah, but all together, they might be right. Like the collection of all the beings that are part of this Sangha represent the breadth of all these skills, the diversity of these approaches. So that's it. Cool. All right. Talk to you next time.
Thank you. Hey, I just put that list down, but if you want me to put it up, if there's anything in particular you want to look at on it, let me know and I'll put it back up.
Do you have any thoughts, Lisa?
Yeah, you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to, oh, sorry, just in chat, John says, could you send us the file? Yes, I will, John. I'll send it out at the end of the talk. Yeah. Remind me if you don't get it, please. Okay. Yeah, you know, one of the things that was a question that I asked you earlier and that I think maybe I want to keep asking you periodically when I forget is this sense of having received so much of this, really this breadth of empowerment from Rinpoche and feeling the wealth of it in the Sangha, and yet feeling like, remember I emailed you this one time and I said, Derek, I had this dream where I was confessing to you that I'm not a good enough activist. I'm not involved enough in activism, and it's a bit of a personal crisis of how to apply compassion, how to apply, you know, this empowerment that we've received from Rinpoche to the current moment, which is full of sort of crisis and call to action, and how to reconcile that with the sense of sort of drowning in capitalism and busyness of life and white fragility and all the other sort of issues. And we had this great talk about it on the phone, I remember, but I was wondering if there was anything you might say that could apply to more than just me about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things we talked about before was all the different roles that we can play in supporting community. I really think something Rob's been emphasizing in phone calls he and I have had, that Anatta shouldn't be seen as a negation of things. It should be seen as a recognition of our interconnectedness and our interdependence and supportfulness we have with all beings, rather than some kind of denial or walling off of, or some kind of negation. A Cree professor I've talked to, Duane Donald, he says, you can't understand white people unless you understand forts. And I always thought he would be a great teacher of Anatta, because Duane says, you know, you all arrived here with forts, and now each of you builds a fort, and you fill it with provisions, and you kind of try and wall off the rest of the world and make sure you're secure, and I'm all right, Jack, and everybody else can, you know, go down or have everything, whatever's going to happen to them. He said, you got it. It's like you're all a bunch of forts. And I thought, that's a great image for understanding the opposite of Anatta. And it's also not, it's a concept. It's also not entirely true, of course, is it? Because I mean, the thing I took away from Terry's talk a couple of months ago that was the strongest for me was sitting together, and how he started. I'd always done my meditation from the top down. He started from the bottom up, and you felt the support of the planet underneath you. as you started your practice, and it was like, wow, you know, how could you have a view of yourself as a separated, walled off being if you start that way and feel the connectedness with the earth? Back when I started as an activist in the early 80s, I went to actually a theater workshop with an organizer from El Salvador who had American parents and was distantly related to Robert Bolt, who wrote A Man for All Seasons. Anyway, this theater director talked about the revolution in El Salvador and the uprising of the peasants against the American-backed elite and the death squads and so on. It was eventually a successful revolution. They got rid of the gang of thugs running the country. But he said, I remember him saying there were these different sides to the struggle. He said, yes, people ran for office and you should do voting, right? Okay, that was one thing. It was politics, if you like. But he said then there was, in their case, there was armed resistance and struggle. They had people in the mountains and they were fighting. He said, but then we have people doing what I'm doing. We have theater. We have to actually tell stories that motivate and lift people and move us, keep us going, and kind of weave the commonality of us so that we have the support to keep going. And then he said, and then we need parents, teachers, healers. He said, if you don't have that in your collective, you don't keep the struggle going and you have nothing to lean on in the times of despair. And then he separated out. He said, and then you need healers and medics, people working with medicine and that kind of thing. And he included spiritual practitioners in there. He said, you know, the working with the spirit, that's the healing aspect. He said, so then you have a struggle. You have all these elements. And so it's to look to see your part in it, what part you play. There was an American named Paul Goodman who in the 60s, he used to give workshops. And at one of the workshops he did in Cuernavaca, Mexico, with a group of students of Ivan Illich, he posed this question. He said, imagine the revolution is over and we have a divine and humane society. Okay, it's Thursday, all right, and the revolution is finished. It's Thursday, and it's all taken care of. Like the world is balanced and kind and humane and ecological. Okay, Friday morning, what are you going to do? What happens? What does your life look like when you get out of bed on Friday morning? What do you do? How much of that are you doing anyway?
Right. That's a really good point.
Now, and then he said, okay, go and do it. The things that you aren't, how many of them could you do? We shouldn't cede too much ground to capitalism that it hasn't earned yet. Our entire life has not been enclosed by money and by fear. And predominantly, capitalism gets a bad rap as being about greed. No, it's worse than that. It's not really about greed. It's about fear. It's about fear of not having the requisites, food, shelter, clothing, that you'll be living under a bridge because you don't have some currency. That's a terrible way to construct a civilization. It's really abysmal. And I mean, that's, I feel, is the insight my indigenous friends have shown. They kind of nod their heads and go like, are you kidding? You guys willingly construct a civilization this way? It's bonkers. But we don't live our entire lives under that. I mean, you're going to get out of bed on Friday morning and look after Ronan and have tea and visit with people you care about. There'll be things that go on, tend your garden, right? And these are post-revolutionary moments. You would be doing these in the ecological and balanced and humane society, not just in this one, right? So see already those kinds of activities and recognize the extent to which we live in a post-revolutionary society, you know, of balance and kindness. And then things that you think you might not be able to do, challenge that and see if you can do them. And also challenge the notion that activism is, which gets narrowly portrayed as something like chanting slogans and carrying banners in the street, is what we're, you know, that's the only way to be active. Margaret Atwood, in one of her books, in the foreword to one of her books, says, politics is when two people meet on the sidewalk and talk. That's politics. So yeah, so do politics, talk to people. And when I was, I went down to Berea, Kentucky. There's a little Christian school there in the 90s to meet this man I just mentioned, Ivan Illich, who is a hero of mine. He was giving a talk, and at the end of the talk, an African-American woman in the audience asked him, stood up and asked him, she said, I get despair sometimes. I get discouraged. How do you keep on going? And Illich was an unusual public speaker. He refused to use microphones because he didn't believe in one voice louder than others. And he didn't like being on stage. So he had come down and he was standing in the middle of the room talking to us. And so when he was asked this question, the other thing, he took about 2 minutes of pause where he didn't answer. He just stood silently in front of us. And then he motioned to someone who was in the front row, turned out to be his best friend, Lee Hoynicki, who came up and stood next to him, put his arm around Lee, looked at her and said, friendship. That's how you keep going, friendship. And that's how we started our hour. And I think that's kind of what it keeps coming back to, friendship. And yeah, and recognizing the ways in which this is, we're already in post-revolutionary times, and then supporting people, you know, thinking up new and creative ways. I asked Rob recently a question about what he thought Rinpoche would do at this time if he was around. And Rob bravely predicted that whatever Rob thought Rinpoche would do, he would do something completely different. Because he was completely unpredictable and so creative that anything you thought was coming, it was always totally out of left field. And I feel like that ought to be our inspiration. You know, he used to love those Far Side cartoons. And you remember the one he carried around and showed us that he would show in class occasionally, and it had, you know, those Far Side cartoons always had these gormless looking people, you know, kind of, you know, with their eyes all and weird faces and stuff. And it had, I think it had 3 frames of those, right? And it had, the first one said optimist, and it had a glass half full of water, and it had the guy's speech bubble. He was looking at it, some gormless guy, and he's looking at it and he's saying, hey, it's half full. And the next one said pessimist, and the guy's staring at a different looking person and going, hey, it's half empty. And the third one, exactly the same glass, right? And this third one, really weird looking person with totally odd face, looks at it and goes, hey, I ordered a cheeseburger. And that, Rinpoche said, was the essence of how we're supposed to teach. We're supposed to get people to cheeseburger. Okay, so it's like, yeah, it looks, this is good or this is bad. And meanwhile, our whole job, how we were taught, is we got to get people to cheeseburger. That's our job. And that's our inspiration. And so that's why I was looking forward. I miss you guys. You know, I wanted to say, as I see people's faces, I miss you. I miss this feeling of being with other cheeseburgers. It's like this is what I think should be a feeling of solidarity. You know, when we meditate together, meditation should not be a solitary activity. It should be a solidarity activity. You know, something we're doing with our fellow beings, with all the elements, and yeah, and then we go out into the world, and we should be inspired to be able to come up with cheeseburger ideas to help people. So, does that totally evade the question you asked, Lisa?
No, it's fantastic. The piece about friendship just totally said it for me, you know. I just want to, we're at 11 o'clock now, and I know it's hard to go a long time on a Zoom meeting, but I wanted to invite anybody, if they had any questions, to put them in the chat or say hello. And also, Derek, I know that you wanted to talk about some future plans for us. You were asking me what I had down for a couple Sundays from now, so I wanted to remind you about that if you wanted to let me know what you had in mind.
Sure. So on 2 Sundays, it'll be October 11th, which is Rinpoche's birthday. So I've asked for permission to tell 5 stories on that morning if people care or want to join. I have, and it's also a request, I've been requested by someone. I mean, you have so many experiences when you study with Rinpoche, but yeah, I just want to get together on that particular morning and talk about, in a way, kind of like, I think each of the stories is a gigantic screw up or mistake I made. And so there'll be 5 giant mistakes and misunderstandings I have about the teaching, interacting with Rinpoche, where I thoroughly missed the plot. So I figured October 11th, Rinpoche's birthday, good time for me to review. I mean, it would be an endless and infinite list, but I'll start with 5. Yeah, 5 huge teachings I received. And I think that's really important part of the teaching is making mistakes. Making mistakes.
Would you like to, shall we host that here on the virtual Dharma temple? Like, would you like?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that's why I was asking if we have the time, it'd be good. Yeah, it'd be fun. Anybody have any comments, criticisms, questions? Criticisms go to Lisa.
Yeah, I'll take. I have another question, but I'll put mine on ice in case anybody else wants to jump in.
Hi, Derek.
Hey,
Hi, it's Karen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hey.
Hi. It's just about friendship. It's just kind of, it's a little bit of a Rinpoche Dharma story. And it's kind of really cool that you just said that, because it's suddenly brought something home. But I'll tell you the story. So I was living in the West Coast, and I was actually in Vancouver, and I went with Fifth and Hamish to an empowerment with the psychiatrism in like Seattle somewhere, or near Seattle. And anyway, on the way back, we camped out overnight, and we stopped at this place. It was the strangest place. It was had been a farm, and the woman had a dream that she should turn it into a Japanese garden, and so she did. And she had this Japanese garden, and she had all this stuff from Japan. And John can probably actually verify if this is accurate. Anyway, we'd had this Black Man Juicery empowerment with the psychiatrism, and it was a very powerful empowerment. And I saw this bell, this huge bell, and I became obsessed. Like, it was in my mind, and it was grabbing me, and I was like, what is this bell? I need to get this bell. And I wanted to send it because Rinpoche, I'd heard that he'd started teaching at Seringma House in 2000 because he was ill. And I thought, they need a bell. they have to have this bell. And so I got it. It was really, really heavy. And I took it to Vancouver, and Don Fox took it to the Dharma Center. And I guess he presented it to Rinpoche, and apparently like Rinpoche, I mean, I wasn't there, but Rinpoche apparently looked at it and said, what are we gonna do with that? You know, something like that. And anyway, he sent it to the Dharma Center, and they put it up at the temple. Anyway, the words on it, the Japanese letters apparently mean friendship.
Mm.
But I didn't, you know, like at the time I was like, what is friendship? I said, oh, it's a good thing. Sounds good to me, you know. Just this bell was really speaking to me. So that story, that just kind of brought that home. And I was like, that bell was meant to be there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's just a story. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Karen, did you say the bell meant friendship? Okay.
Yes, the Japanese letters on the bell, it means friendship.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know the story behind that, Karen.
Yeah, me neither.
Well, Terry was probably in the room, no doubt, when the bell got opened and got sent away. But it does mean friend, apparently.
Terry's here.
Yeah, but when your kid mind didn't remember the meaning of the insignia on the outside, so I'm very happy to hear that story.
Friendship.
Did you hear that, Karen?
He's happy to hear that. What it means.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if someone can send me a picture of the inscription. Anyone who's at the Dharma Center anytime would love to see it.
Oh, that's a good idea, John.
Yeah,
Terry, can you take a picture of it?
absolutely. I'll do that for you, John. Next, you got it. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of add on to this theme of friendship, because again, that moved me very deeply. And I feel I've been through the ringer and I've sort of had every idealistic notion about Dharma and Sangha and all that thing flipped on its ear several times over, and sort of come to feel whatever anyone says about awakened beings or about Dharma, Sangha, or about the ascendancy of Bodhisattva people over anyone else, or any of these kinds of ideas has been disproved to me in spades. And I love it. I love the fact that through all that, the love of Dharma and the love of, people and beings and practice keeps shining through brighter and stronger. And how we're all just, I love this phrase, sentient meat. We're kind of like thrown out here without any explanation as sentient meat. And we're trying to somehow muddle through, whether we're Hitler or Trump or Mother Teresa or the Dalai Lama or whoever. But so for me, when, I hear the clarion call of let's rise up and let's, do stuff for Dharma and let's be like bodhisattvas and let's all get together and I watch the shit show of everybody who's sort of standing up and saying, look at me, look how I'm standing for something, and how much bullshit there is in the example that we set doing that. And how kind of adorable all that is, and how fragile, how vulnerable, or how fragile that is. And so, so when I hear all the calls for will you help, will you do something? It's when I really love a person and I care about a person and I say that person is floundering, or that person doesn't deserve to be getting the shit they're getting. That one person, that's when I feel really moved to do something, because of that friendship that is just, might just be in my own mind. It might just be a fantasy in my own mind, but And so somehow I feel like that's so counterintuitive to what I ever thought about Dharma or anything, you know, it's ongoing, you know, wonder about it.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. That was beautiful. I love you. I miss you.
Same here, same here.
Yeah, I hear you.
For some reason, I'm recollecting after Rinpoche died, I went into retreat, and the only thing available was a book of poems by Lama Shabkar. And in it, there's this, the shortest poem in the book is, birds fly, frogs jump, people get awakened. I thought, yeah.
It's Eleanor. I just wanted to share something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably the only one in this group who never met Rinpoche. I was part of another community in the Washington, D.C. area and came here and then got involved with our community in about 2011, 2012. But since the late 70s, I've been aware of and experienced and been with a number of different elders from different traditions, Mayan, Lakota, Anishinaabe, lots and lots. But anyway, and so I remember in the late 90s, I was living in Toronto and I met Thomas Banyanka, who was a Hopi elder, in a small gathering and within a big gathering. And he took out this piece of rawhide and it had the Hopi prophecy diagram. And he showed that humankind, especially the white people, keep moving in a certain direction and don't turn and change, they're falling off the cliff. And I was so shaken by that. I knew it was true and I knew it would happen in my lifetime. And I quit my job. Again, that whole thing, Derek, of quitting jobs, quit my job that I was working at the Royal Ontario Museum, quit the job, and I was determined to tell the Hopi story and make a video or whatever. It never happened, but it shocked me into an awareness that something progressively was coming. And years later, I was part of a group with David Barry and others that put on a big prayer vigil for the earth on the National Mall for 20 years and learned and did ceremony together. And these times are here. And how do I keep from being totally overwhelmed? I mean, it's one thing to know it's coming and another to be in the middle of it. And I'm feeling it very strongly, and any advice would be welcome.
Thank you, Eleanor. Contact is important. In all the different ways. And I think we can start from friendship, having real connection with beings, not through a screen, but real connection. And then if you can, although you didn't meet him, Rinpoche was a great advocate of projects. Funnily enough, it doesn't really matter what the project is, just doing stuff with people. He had us doing all sorts of things, and we could attach lots of Dharma importance to them, but really it was just working together and being involved with others, really important. Pets, another place for contact. Animals, being out in nature. We had experiences of people who were having mental breakdowns on retreat. And I remember Rinpoche saying that one of the things was we had a really strong environmental support at the Dharma Center. And that was where it was one of the best environments to do support for beings. But even then, we needed to have, guardian angels amongst us, looking out for each other. And sometimes there just weren't enough of us. He would say, this person needs more support than we can give. But contact, friendship, animals, nature, and projects. And staying, and not getting too involved with all the concepts that get circulated on these screens, and getting away from the visual and kind of re-upping the other senses. So to the extent you can use, like I do a bike ride every day on the same 9-kilometer trail, but it's mostly a ride I do by smell. I've seen all the things the same, but it's the smells that change the most. So my whole emphasis, I can't ride that trail with my eyes closed yet, but I mostly navigate it by smell. So using other senses other than sight and kind of bringing some balance is really helpful, and trying to dial down the conceptual overload, because once you have a basic sense of how kind of political economy works and what we're stuck in the middle of, we don't need to hear it's not like there's a lot more that changes the basic conundrum we're in. And then switch to tangible stuff, contact with beings and plants, grow things, talk to people, sing songs, build things with people, and do things locally. Like be really stay focused in your immediate vicinity. Rebecca Solnit, a great essayist, maybe the best essayist alive right now in the United States, did a book called A Paradise Built in Hell, The Extraordinary Communities That Arise in Disaster. She wrote it back in 2005, and she studied catastrophes like earthquakes and hurricanes. And she looked at communities that survive these and communities that go under. She said the one characteristic that binds all the ones that manage to be resilient is that neighbors know each other. She said, the first responders are not paramedics. First responders are your neighbors. And you have to make effort of all the little kind of, the small gestures, the in-betweens. My friends, many of them on this call, we often talk about in-betweens. It's not the kind of it's the in-betweens that are important, finding the in-between moments. And developing connections, even, small things and small gestures repeatedly with many beings around us. That are give us some kind of feeling of roots and presence, so that we're not too much in our heads, because we can get the impression that meditation is a head trick, and it's really from the neck down, if you like. We really have to get into here, right? And get that feeling with other beings. And that really becomes, then if your meditations are really corporal, then they're supportive, I think, of our And they're an antidote, they're a counterweight to this conceptual panic and tension that comes from, and also, you know, if there is immediate crisis, let's say some kind of breakdown or storm or whatever, we want to actually be able to be present and calm and creative and responsive to what the situation is. One occasion, Rinpoche said to the group piece, said, you know what I look for in a student? I evaluate a student by two things: compassion and flexibility of mind. And it's like, okay, like how flexible are we in kind of being real with whoever's in front of us and what's really going on, and not being just spouting some kind of dogma, you know? Anyway, others may have other things to add. I'm sure you do, that may respond to that. And I also want to be cognizant that Lisa's watching the clock and wants to interject to tell us people can leave whenever they want. But if others have something to say on this, because I think you're, I thank you for that, Eleanor. I think you've brought up a crux of what is facing a lot of people right now.
Yeah, actually, clock watching is the farthest thing from my mind. I'm thinking so many things at the moment, but I should mention that if anybody needs to leave the call, we might stay on and chat, but we're recording, and if you have to go, that's okay. And if you want to stay and chat for a little while longer, that's also okay, as long as Derek is up for chatting.
I have to leave by Thursday, but otherwise I'm here.
I had a couple of things I wanted to say. First, I've got a question here in the chat from Susan Fisher that I didn't want to leave and forget about. And she's just saying, she's asking about if you're teaching online, if you can do anything like that. She says, I love being with you again, Derek. I'm wondering if you will be teaching online regularly. I would sure appreciate it. It has become too difficult to get to your yearly retreat, Sob. And anyway, COVID may continue to prevent in-person retreats for some time. So that's from Susan.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I think we will be doing, we'll be resuming. We have a YouTube channel, which I think the title is A Little Mudita. And we did regular classes on that from March through till June. And then we went through some changes, and so, but we'll be resuming that shortly. So folks, we may do them through this too, I don't know. Well, I've only done this twice on Zoom. So I like it because we can see people and interact. So yeah, for sure. I think it's important that friends get together and support each other. So I miss the gang.
Can I ask my question? Or I don't know if it's a question or something that's halfway resolved that I want to muddle through, and maybe you can comment. So when you were talking about what would you do on Thursday afternoon after the revolution, that really spoke to me. Because as you were saying that, I was looking at the Tonka above you, and I felt like that is like Vajrayana, like be the deity, you know? Go past the difficulty that you're having on an ego level right now, whatever it is, and embody as much of what the goal is as possible, and the rest will come along, you know, work on the strength, right? And with all my gardening and everything, I mean, that really speaks to me. I try to do that. And the other half of my question that I think is really related with that is, I feel like there's an anxiety in the Western Dharma practitioner community, not necessarily ours per se, about an anxiety about wading into the muck of activism because how triggering it is. And I've felt that there's sort of a Dzogchen perspective or a Vajrayana perspective, where kind of like there are these beyond perspectives that encompass that in a non-dual way. But at the same time, I feel also like there is some hesitance or fear of wading into a territory that, although it's compassionate, we are afraid that it's going to destabilize us and all of the so-called practice that we may have made with meditating and trying to, establish calm and wake it up. So it's a complicated question, and I feel like in a way, maybe the first thing that I mentioned that you said sort of answered it in a sense, but I don't know, maybe you might have something else to say about it.
My experience with younger activists is that they're so much more awakened than the groups that I started out with. I feel like you don't really have to be hesitant about young people, the Greta Thunbergs and the Sunrise Movement, and I'm just stunned by their understanding of the interconnections of different types of systemic oppression and suffering. That I kind of had a one-dimensional view of things when I got involved, and then slowly added things. When I go to chat with younger activists now, they understand and they totally integrate feminism, class analysis, Black rights, Indigenous rights, ecology, but often, usually with a very friendly and creative. I was talking to Richard Yin, who's down in Perth, involved with Doctors for Ecology and is a longtime student of Rinpoche's. And he was saying how exciting it was to be with the younger generation of activists who are just way further ahead than we are. It's like, oh yeah, forget it. They really get it. And I think the one element I would say from this Tanka that I hope comes into practice for us, but it was a real liberation for me, was Rinpoche's teaching about the black face side of this Tanka that looks into the supposed defilements. And the way I understood it, sometimes I feel like we're a horse-drawn carriage and we have horses going in two directions, right? Like there's the white face on this side and the black face. And there's all the good things that are pulling me this way and kind of the defilements going this way. And the point was not to clip the reins and get rid of those horses. The point is to get them all pulling in the same direction, right? And it's like, how are these supposed, negative aspects of my being manifestations of how I'm struggling with the particular set of causes and conditions of this lifetime. And how do I bring that all together and going in the same direction and integrate, and not try to definitely, this isn't about some kind of heroic accomplishment. And it is the danger of the dominant kind of social economic arrangement is that it intersects with a kind of a negative way to perceive Dharma. It's very individualistic and competitive. And it gives a sense that, awakening is this individual accomplishment, right? Nobody awakens alone. It's a team effort. When you're in a cabin practicing at the Dharma Center, the thing that occurs for all of us, or when you're anywhere on retreat, and the least solitary you ever are, in my experience, is when you're on retreat. You feel connected with all phenomena, and you feel all the aspects of your being are slowly coming together and supporting the goal, right? And then from time to time, you glimpse that the goal's already here. And then you go out and interact with beings and you see the awakened aspect of beings that's already present. And you want to encourage that because you see it in them. They don't see it in themselves sometimes. So that to me is the gift we bring when we get involved in our communities. And really, this is just a kind of, it's just a giant kind of unified effort to work with Anatta, like to help beings understand our interconnectedness and to break down this kind of perceived solitariness that folks have. And that's not just perceived, but that's kind of enacted by the social economic structure that kind of isolates and atomizes people constantly, pushes people into these isolated silos and little forts, you know, and to take that and open it and point out that we're connected and supporting each other and bring the Dharma aspect to that and recognize the awakening that's already in beings. You know, I think some of you were there, and I've told this story before, but I won't go into the long version because it takes days for me to tell this story. But on one occasion, there was a Tae Kwon Do instructor who was on retreat at the Dharma Center at the same time I was there. And there were only 2 guys at the center, but actually there were only 2 people at the center at that time. And anyway, because you know when you're at the center and you have a job to do, mine was cleaning the bathhouse. And I go into the bathhouse and there's a Post-it note on the mirror that says, whoever's cleaning the bathhouse, you're doing a crappy job. Do better. Now, there's only 2 people at the center. I know who wrote the note and we know who the other person is. Come on. And then I have to go to Seringma House, and Terry picks this time of all. I don't know why, but anyway, he had to go to a dentist appointment or go somewhere else. He wasn't there and to start the beginning of this when this happened. But he came in halfway through, and Rinpoche had said he would teach if only one person showed up. And on that day, I was helping be an attendant because Terry wasn't there at the beginning of this. And this Tae Kwon Do guy was there, and Rinpoche was there. And Rinpoche gave a class just to this Tae Kwon Do guy. And this guy, man, like Rinpoche gives this short class and then says, any questions? This guy stands up. Like, who does that in an empty room? Stands up and goes, yes, sir, I have a question, sir. And I'm looking at him thinking, this guy wrote this crappy note on the mirror to me. What an, excuse me, jerk. I'm looking at him from the side and he says, he goes, sir, could you explain, please, the 4 stages of awakening, sir? And at this point, somewhere in here, Terry comes back in because we're both sitting on either side of Rinpoche. And I remember this. And this one guy, Tae Kwon Do guy's in front. And it's the only time in the whole history of the teaching I ever saw Namja Rinpoche look at a student perplexed. He looked, and you know how you normally cut us off when he answered questions? You couldn't get the question out and he'd jump in and answer it. So anyway, he looks at this guy and he stops and he looks at him and there's a pause. And I'm looking at him going, I know what the answer to this is. I mean, 4 stages of, you know, it's in all the books. And of course, Terry does what he does sometimes from the side. Terry goes, sir, I think he means, you know, Satapana, Sakadagama, Anagama. And Rinpoche looks at Terry, he goes, no, 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 no. And I'm thinking, no, that's the answer. That I agree. And Rinpoche goes, no, 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 no. There aren't 4 stages to awakening. He says, awakening is closer than hands and feet. Awakening is always present. He says there are 4 stages to the falling away of defilements, to blocks of seeing that, but there's not 4 stages to awakening. Awakening is always present. You guys have probably heard that 100 times, and I'd probably been in classes where he'd said that, but I didn't hear it until that day. But review your practice, because I review, and I know the reason I heard it that day was because I was not in an entirely wholesome state. I was actually, my state of hostility and dosa was present, and I had negative, hostile views towards that student. But because I did, and I was on edge, but I was practicing as well as being in a negative state and also practicing as best as I could to be aware and in the moment, it cut through and got to me, that answer. And that bowled me over. And I went back into retreat, and it was very productive. And I heard it for the first time. But in part, it was the integration or the allowing of that negative state to be present. And I have to be honest and confess, for about years after, I thought that the reason I understood it finally, because I was such a good practitioner and I'd be meditating so well. No, it was because I actually was in a presence of a negative state at the same time as a positive state. And there was some ability to integrate those and have the negative fuel the break and the understanding. So anyhow, that was a key turning point in my understanding. And it comes, and I have to thank, because there's multiple teachers at that point. Terry, Tae Kwon Do guy, Rinpoche, and my defilement were all part of how I learned at that moment. Not merely me thinking, because my immediate view that I was such a good meditator and I finally had a breakthrough. No. So I think that's important for us to actually review and see the role that our complex and mixed set of phenomena play in how we unfold, and then also how that's actually true. Rinpoche didn't lie. Awakening is closer than hands and feet. It is always present. Mind is always in union. Our views are not, but mind always is. So I feel like our work is to elicit that, help people see that. Whether they think they're Buddhists or not, it doesn't really matter, or meditators or not, is to become aware of that going on. And that's also the post-revolutionary work. It's also the post-enlightenment work. Beings are already awakened, they don't know it. So how do we help beings see that awakening aspect that's in them? And it's very similar to the activist work. It's getting beings to recognize the degree to which we already are compassionate and kind and open.
Derek, we're fortunate to be sitting up here in Georgian Bay together, the four of us. And one of the things that Cecily would remind me about was the importance of taking the shrine to the village, or taking your practice into whatever circumstance you find yourself. So for instance, Heather, in her beautiful field mandalas and messaging to the greater community about farms, the importance of farms, or Eleanor bringing her practice to the foots of Washington. But I also wanted to say that we all manifest in different ways. We've been given so many tools over the years, and some of us can walk freely in the world now, and some of us can't. But that doesn't mean that your work on the cushion or while you're walking, you are not separate from Shakyamuni. You are not separate from Christ. It's just knowing that and manifesting. I remember walking with Rinpoche in the city of Toronto, and he recognized when I was smiling at complete strangers, and then encouraged other people to do that. Because you don't know how that's going to affect somebody's day. As simple as that. And that, social activism is awakening. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you have to join me on the street and protest climate change. Be great, but, not everybody can do that. Or not everybody's interested in that. And that's the other thing, is where is your interest? And let that blossom so that you can be a real manifestation of the awake mind for others and lift them up and make change. The other positive thing I'd like to say is that there are rumblings going on. It was on the front page of the CBC, I think, or the Globe, talking about how capitalism actually doesn't work. And that was just this past week. That was a huge, there's talks and rumblings about how the structure needs to be readdressed so that through pandemic, the 1% is getting richer and richer, and meanwhile people are losing their homes. So, I mean, this may appear to be a tragedy, but actually there may be some shifts. But the shifts need people to sit on their cushion. The shift needs meetings like this. And yeah, so that's sort of what I wanted to say. Just remember to take your work from the cushion into the world in whatever way you can. And let that be your pillar.
Thank you, Karen. Well, unless anybody has anything else they want to contribute, I think we're approaching just short of 2 hours, so perhaps we could bring it to a close. And thank you, everyone, for getting together. It's nice to be with you all. I miss the gang. It's nice to see folks. So let's share the merit of our gathering for the lessening of suffering of all beings. Idam te punyakama asawakya motu. Idam te punyakama asawakya motu. Idam te punyakama asawakya motu. Sabbe sata sukita hantu. May all beings be well and happy. By the power of our actions, may we attain awakening. Having attained awakening, may we defeat all evils through the endless storms of birth, illness, old age, and death. May we help all beings to cross the oceans of suffering of the worlds. By the power of these actions, may our teachers all be well and happy. May they abide happily. May they have long lives. May they travel safely. May they spread the Dharma as vast as the sky. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thanks, folks.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Yeah.
Derek.
Take good care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa, for hosting. Lovely to see you all.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thanks for having us.